too bad. Yourself?
Pretty good. Try not to melt at the moment. It's
No kidding, eh?
it's staggering, genuinely. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised really at this point, but we had our last heat wave like last week, basically.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, it's going to be a bit cooler for a bit of time. Probably have a few storms, bit of cool weather. We'll be all right. That lasted for about 3 days. And then since then, it's just gone up and up and up. It's meant to be 30 degrees tomorrow.
Celsius.
Celsius, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty hot.
But it's meant to feel, that's just the air temperature. It's meant to feel hotter than that.
Right, humidity,
Yeah, humidity. Obviously, the ground's going to be quite warm. I'm on a train tomorrow for 6 hours as well. So,
are the trains like? Do they have like AC or anything? Like,
now I don't actually. They must do. I can't say I've ever noticed.
Feels hot.
Last year I had to make the same journey around this sort of time, but it was cooler.
Okay.
So I didn't really notice it as much. I'm slightly dreading. My train is at 5:40 or so. So
okay,
should be after rush hour. Should be after most people. Well, I say that actually. So it's sort of 5 o'clock if you're thinking that's the sort of time, isn't it? So
right.
We'll see how busy it is. I'm hoping it's not too busy because it's going to be very hot otherwise. But it's life, right?
I guess. Yeah, that's unfortunate. It'd be nice if it was like, a little bit more comfortable temperatures.
Yeah. And it links nicely into our sort of climate crisis political discourse.
Yeah.
Like, I can't help but feel like, I'm quite lucky. Like, obviously, I wouldn't say I'm like a super athlete or anything, but like, I'm a fit and healthy person. I can regulate. My body is not going to overheat.
Right.
I can drink water. I'm sort of not going to be at risk as such, and more than the average person.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I work with children, young children are quite vulnerable to this sort of hot weather, especially as there's a lot of them still realizing that their body won't just, they have to actually take steps to look after themselves in the heat. And
they don't remember to drink enough water, and
don't drink enough, don't dress appropriately, don't wear sun hats and stuff. Or take it off and it's gone somewhere, they don't know where it is. And then the other extreme, obviously, the elderly, people whose bodies are much older and are at a stage of their life where they need other people to, sort of help them out through their stuff.
No, I know. I haven't heard much this year, but I know, like in previous years, whenever we've had like heat waves and stuff, you always hear about the number of elderly people who die because they don't have air conditioning and it's too hot for their bodies, and they end up keeling over.
It's quite tragic, really, isn't it? Because, and like a lot of, obviously through the ages, you've got the people with pre-existing conditions, right? Like if you suffer from a respiratory problem, or if you find it harder to move around anyway, if you don't have access to stuff that helps you keep cool because you're poorer or you're not in a affluent area, like that increases your chance of having a heat emergency, which
for sure. Which often you're not in a position where the resources are there for you if you have an emergency either. So, it's too bad.
Yeah, it's rotten. Like it's like the thing is, it doesn't have to be quite as bad as this.
No, that's right.
Because it's not as though 30 degrees Celsius. Yeah, it's hot, but that does happen sometimes in summer. In a society that was like a bit better, more organized, had put more thought into how they're going to manage the summer months.
Yeah, it
wouldn't be such. You'd have access to water, a work day that's not literally in the hottest hours of the day in stuffy, not air conditioned buildings as is common in the UK. It's sort of we're stuck with quite a rigid system that we can't really do much about whilst we exist under capitalism, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because my partner, she's from Burundi, and we talk about these things a little bit, and it's always 28 degrees there. Like it's just the most beautiful weather you're ever going to experience. It's perfect. And but they aren't like I'm used to rigid timelines. Like if you say your appointment's at 1:00, then you're there at 1:00. And if you're late, then you apologize. But that's not how things are there. Everybody's much more relaxed, and they take a break during the hottest time of the day. And like, I've heard the same thing about Mexico, like where like during the hottest part of the day, that's when they're not out in the sun working. They work in the evening and they work in the morning, but they don't work during that hottest mid-afternoon garbage.
And it's just like the same Spain and Portugal do that as well.
Like we really could learn from these people.
Worryingly, we may have to if given the sort of projected rise in temperature.
Yeah, that's right. Like we absolutely, there's no reason for us to be burning ourselves to death in the middle of the afternoon. It's just dumb.
And I think as well the cumulative effects of it, like 5-day working week as well, sort of makes it.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, maybe if it was like 1 or 2 days of it, you'd sort of be like, okay, this is a bit of a thing. But
right, I can push through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When you get to day 3 and there's still 2 days left and your body is like knackered. And throw in, I was reading about this the other day as well. Obviously, the UK has one city that's quite disproportionately larger than the rest, right? London is massive. And that's not to say Birmingham, Manchester and such aren't, Glasgow aren't big cities, but London is the economic and cultural hub of the country. And so the residential areas spread far beyond what is London into all the sort of commuter towns and villages and stuff outside London. So as well as working this full day, you've got a 1, possibly even 2-hour commute on sweaty, packed public transport. Or worse, a car, but you're sat in for hours and hours in gridlocked traffic.
Yeah. No, so I drive to work. I drive 2 hours, and then I drive back 2 hours, and I work a 12-hour day. Wow. So my days are pretty long when I'm on shift. But whenever somebody asks me, well, how do you do it? I'm like, well, it's better than like literally living in like Vancouver or, a suburb of Vancouver where the commute is the same, but instead of moving 200 kilometers, I'm only moving 20, like it, I drive 2 hours because I'm 200 kilometers from work.
Yeah.
So that, but there's nobody in my way. I drive, I set my cruise, I listen to podcasts. It's not that bad.
Yeah. I think the worst in the world I read is Sao Paulo in Brazil, which has a 3-hour average commute for some people in the city's suburbs, which is staggering. Like genuinely, it's the most populated city in Brazil, which is already quite a big country anyway.
Right.
But just urban jungle, miles and miles of gridlocked motorways.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, I can't imagine the being stuck thing. Like that's like you're just stuck where you are. You can't back out. You can't pull into the next lane. You're just like, when we move forward, we move forward. And if I'm not in the right lane, I'm fucked.
I think the frustrating thing as well is that's another thing that could be like with a functioning public transport system, a well-funded, society consensed. We're going to invest in giving people better options for their transport. Because like obviously, I feel like when people hear public transport for all, they imagine like not one person is going to have a car. Everyone's going to take the bus right this second. Otherwise, you're going to be put to death. Like it's it doesn't have to be like that extreme. Even if just a fraction of people switch to public transport, you can reduce emissions, which reduces heat, which reduces the traffic, which makes it better for everyone, right? Like it's a win-win.
Right. For sure. And like all these, it's always, the concern is based on like the current public transit system. So they're always worried, well, we're going to be overrun with buses and the buses are going to be like packed full of people. And it's like, well, we would have to fund this correctly. We would have to like actually put money into this.
It's that typical right-wing thinking, isn't it? Where they, a lot of the time, they'll be like, oh, well, if you want to advocate for this, what about all these other problems which are also caused by the same root cause?
Yeah, that's right. Like you're thinking along the same lines as capitalism is forcing us all into car culture And so then you've got gridlock. And of course, if you just throw people on buses, you're going to have problems. But the idea is to increase the number of buses and improve routes and reduce traffic in general. And like,
yeah. And a lot of it is just like certainly in the UK with our austerity programs we've had since since the 2010 government, but really Thatcher started a lot of it in the 80s, right? Or just handing public assets to private industry and such.
Yeah.
But a lot of the improvements would literally just be returning to what we saw a few decades ago, right?
Right.
Like, the amount of services. So I used to, now I'm living in a city, but I grew up quite a bit in a town, not the complete like countryside, and not like completely removed from society, but certainly not. You know, we had like quite a lot of moorland like around us, and so the secondary school I went to was like the sort of main school for the region. So if you weren't going to drive along the motorway to Plymouth, you were going to this school, and it was all right for me because I lived in the town this school was in, so I could just walk, right? Like I could just walk 10, 15 minutes and I'm there. Right. If you're coming on the bus, you're traveling 45 an hour to get to school when the bus service runs, which is fine mostly. But if it snows, if it's bad weather, if it's some other blockage, then there's no replacement service. There's one bus. And,
then you just don't go to school.
And then that compounds for people who, like, it's all right if you're a kid and there's sort of some obligation to provide a school bus.
Right.
If you're trying to get to work, there's no company bus, right? You're relying on existing one bus per, every 2 hours. And if that's missed, then guess you're getting late to work.
Yeah, that's right. And like that's the thing. I think often like Western cultures could learn from like maybe the global South or like or whatnot, because like again, Pam talks about Burundi, and like if it's downpouring, like because they don't have snow obviously, but they have like rainy season.
Yeah, like monsoons and stuff.
Yeah. So if you have an appointment and it's raining, nobody expects you to go to that appointment. If you have to go to work, nobody expects you to go to work that day because it's a monsoon, or they wait, if you wait until it's done raining. Where like I would, I've driven through some of the worst blizzards in Saskatchewan history to get to work, like truly dangerous road conditions, just because I believe I've been, my work expects me to be there and I can't afford to not get paid. And like, it's just a cultural shift that we need to embrace, that like,
definitely.
You're allowed to miss work if the road conditions are not good for you to go.
And I think that speaks to the production of capitalism as a sort of global north, modern West, modernity, right? Like we forget that whilst we like to pretend, everyone uses capitalism because it's the most logical system and everyone around the globe has it. It's been very much imposed upon most. I mean, obviously it's imposed upon us as just people in a capitalist society, but even more so, the global South have basically not only colonized and ravaged their materials and basically turned into just tools for the West to get richer. But
it's imposed in a whole different way, right? Like it's not.
But like the fact that different ways of operating society, and even just culturally, as you just said, like existing, is separate to the sort of rigid, I'm the consumer, so I must have things right now, and you've got to stick to it even if the country's falling apart. It's like, I think you can tell a lot of it with how people act in sort of consumer-orientated settings. Like the amount of people. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've not worked in retail, but my siblings have, and the people you encounter who basically you almost I'm paying for this product, therefore I can treat you however I like.
Right.
And, you're basically my indentured servant, basically.
Right. Like
you're I'm in this premises.
Barely treated like human. Like you're just. They could put you. I could treat you, the human, as a self-checkout in a way, and I can maybe even worse because I can yell at you and I can belittle you and because I'm a customer, and that makes me better somehow.
But it speaks to that same thing, right? Like it's in one culture that is less capitalist constructed, It's like, oh, well, common sense should reign. It's shocking weather. It's going to be hard to get to the doctors or whatever, or the supermarket. Let's pause it. Let's just chill. In sort of our hyper consumer Western world, oh well, I've paid for this, and this service is my natural right, so I must have it. It's instant. Otherwise, we're going to fire someone on minimum wage.
Right.
It's never, because you could see, there might be a point if it was like a service that you were paying quite a bit of money for, right? And if there was going to be some consequence for the overall structure, you'd be sort of content complaining if it was like going to have a consequence for the overall structure. Yeah. But instead, you just know that like Bob the cleaner is going to have a pay decrease or just sacked.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like I remember and this isn't unique to my company, but I had a coworker a few years ago who hit the ditch driving to work in a snowstorm. So he missed that work day. So he just didn't get paid that day. He was on his way to work, suffered a consequence that is uncontrollable. He couldn't do anything about it, and loses a day's worth of pay because of it. And
it's grotesque, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And that's just the way the industry works, right? Like you're just too bad. Yeah. No, there's something backwards about it, I think.
It's very backwards. And I think that when you hand private industry control of so much of society, those capitalistic instincts kick in, right? Like on some level, the person in charge of that company and the people sort of on board and such know that your co-worker wasn't ever going to be able to make it in that day. You can't physically, if your car has been totaled and in a ditch somewhere, like how are you going to cover the amount of distance, right? It's just absurd. But the economic principle says, well, this person has let down the flow of capital. We are less productive, and therefore they, as the malfunctioning worker, or tool, or cog, because they're ultimately viewed as just some profit-making scheme in this case, needs to go. Got to get someone else in who.
Too bad.
It's shocking.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And I think we have similar. We have 0-hour contracts in the UK.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm sure you must have. I don't know if that's called that in Canada, but
I've heard of them. So it's you work for a company, but they're not obligated to schedule you, kind of.
Yeah. It's a contract that's flexible and allows for innovative practice, but in reality means your boss calls and says, "You've got some work today. Show up, please."
Right.
And you don't know until fairly short notice. Often, sometimes even the day itself. It heads to 0 hours, right? Whether or not you're working. So you show up and you do often not very pleasant work for fairly low pay.
Yeah.
And that's your job. So there's no, if you're trying to afford your bills and such, you've got no real security, because potentially your employer can just say, well, I've got no hours this week or month.
Yeah.
Not gonna have to pay you. And it's the free market thinking is, oh well, we give the worker the choice. They can take hours where they come and go.
Right.
And, we're able to allow for efficient practices and make more money and such. But in reality, it just means that they don't have to offer the same benefits that are legally required to offer a salaried contracted worker. Right.
That's right. You don't qualify as full-time or even part-time because you're a casual or a 0-hour worker, right? So then, you don't get any benefits. Like you won't get health care. You won't get, matching RSPs or retirement programs or any of that stuff. So, yeah.
Despite performing the same tasks as other salaried workers.
Yeah.
It's literally just a way of them making more money and having to spend less on their workforce.
Yep.
Which is capitalism 101, right? Like the whole principle is that you're paying for someone else's labor for you to be able to make more with their produce, right?
Yeah.
But you can imagine, I think, with a lot of in some liberal capitalist thought process, you can imagine they imagine people who maybe wanted to do a little bit of work somewhere but not a full amount, and so they thought, oh well, we'll just have temporary contracts and we'll just have a form of work that isn't quite as laid down in the red tape and regulations and such. It'll be super easy. And in their mind, because a lot of them do genuinely believe that these sort of working arrangements are useful and helpful for people.
Right.
They imagine that it just sort of everyone who has one is able to benefit from quick money and quick hours and stuff, and just gets by and
it's
ignores the cold reality of it.
Yeah, it's like gig work, right? Like the idea is that this is just something you can do in your spare time, and you can make a little bit of extra cash, and it doesn't really take too much away from you as a person. But then the reality is that you don't get paid enough for the miles that your car puts on. You don't get enough passengers to make enough money to make it even worthwhile half the time. And people try to use it as like a full-time job, but that means then they have to be available as many hours as they can be available. And I don't know about other places, but in Saskatchewan, in Canada, the max you can do in Uber, say, is 12 hours in a row with a break.
Yeah.
So there's people that are literally like on the app for the full 12 hours. They take their 6-hour break or whatever and then start it over again.
It's grim, isn't it? I mean, I've got a friend, obviously I'm attending university. He is a Deliveroo driver. Equivalent to, do you have Deliveroo in Canada?
No, but we got DoorDash and Skip the Dishes.
Yeah, same principle, right?
Uber Eats.
And he so obviously we've got lectures and seminars and stuff during the week, and then his weekend is spent doing what we've just described, just chaining big shifts together. Obviously, the weekend, lots of people get takeaway, so you get more higher chance. We say it's not, as we've just said, it's not guaranteed, but you get a higher chance of orders and thus delivery routes and such. And you're doing this to be able to afford accommodation fees and the stuff you need to study and all the sort of cost of living stuff, which is increasing alongside all our stuff at a different rate to that your wage increases, because there's no it's not exactly a lucrative job being a delivery driver.
No.
And it's just a grim way to live, and also not the efficient production of new labourers that liberal capitalism has sort of promised, right? Because if you want the best people going to university and then becoming the best workers possible with advanced skills and training and such, and higher educational values and goals and such, if they've had to dedicate so much time to like slaving away basically on a bike trying to max out every delivery possible in a set period of time, they're not going to be as effective, right? It's staggering.
Yeah, no, that's right. Because and it's just a tough situation. I don't know. It's every. It makes me think too, like even like a company, say like Loblaws in Canada, which is like our main grocery store chain, right? They own so many stores, and they don't have, like, as far as I know, no grocery store staff are full time. They're all part timers at a max of like 25 to 30 hours, because 32 hours is now full time in Canada. So they've got them limited to these maximum number of hours so that they don't have to pay them out as though they're a full-time employee. They don't have to keep them on benefits. They don't have to keep them on like any of these, because we don't have, in Canada, we have national health care, but we don't have dental, we don't have eyewear, and we don't have like mental health or like massage or any of that. Physiotherapy isn't covered for some reason. So a lot of that stuff might be covered under like a benefits program, but if you're only working 25 hours every week, then you don't necessarily qualify for the best level of these things. And it's just a way for the company to maximize, again, their profits at the expense of their workers, which is, I guess, the game, right? That's the whole fucking thing.
No, exactly. It's exactly that. It is the game. Like, and it is a game for the people making these sort of high-end decisions too, right?
Yeah.
They are abstracted from the labor physically and economically. Physically, they're often not there, right? Like the CEO of the Gov delivery or Uber Eats, whatever, is never going to meet the guy who's on his bike trying to make deliveries in time.
Yeah.
But economically as well, they are thinking in terms of millions. Yeah. They're trying to justify where their resources are going to go. They're trying to think, okay, well, how are we going to maximize our shareholders' profits and therefore justify my salary at the end of the day?
Yep.
And so they don't consider that the person going about their day trying to squeeze every drop out of their shift and not qualifying for the benefits you get from being a full-time employee or having an actual contract, is going to be potentially weighing up whether to pay for their internet bill or whether to buy enough stuff to last, food to last them the week, whether or not they're going to have a proper meal to start their day, or if they're going to think, okay, well, maybe I'll skip breakfast today so I can, afford the electricity bill at the end of the week.
Right.
Let alone a serious incumbent like let's say you're one of these delivery drivers, right? If you have had to provide if you're supplying your own vehicle to this, be it a car or your bike, and something happens to it, there's no you're not a contracted employee, right? So there's no reimbursement coming from whoever to fix it for you. You're gonna have to come. That's gonna have to come out of your end.
Yep. And like it makes me think actually, because I did for about 6 months, I did all of the apps that were available to me for my job. Like that's the only work I had was gig work. There wasn't a lot of people hiring, and I had lost my previous job, which I'm now at again. But but anyway, for about 6 months, I did just gig work, and it's a constant struggle, right? Because you're paying your rent, you're paying your groceries, you're paying your other bills. But your job relies on your cell phone, so you have to have a data plan, which means you have to spend X number of dollars on that data plan. And if you fall behind on it, and one day, like I had, where one day I tried to use my app and I just didn't have data. The only call I can make out of my phone is to contact the phone company, and I sit there and I argue with them and try to get them to give me my phone back so that I can make enough money to pay the bill.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it? That speaks to the way that sort of these practices creep into everything too, right?
Yeah.
Like phone bill, internet bill. If you're relying on various services on the internet, that's going to cost. If you're using vehicles, then obviously that has a whole host of things that you have to have done.
Yeah.
Often the qualifications you need to have to do various jobs are privately supplied, so you're having to pay an upfront fee to get the qualification you need to do it, like just X, Y, Z, just because constant ways to monetize just
it drags
everyday existence.
That's right. It drags it out of you. Like so in Saskatchewan, again, like I can't say specifically for anywhere else, but like if you want to drive rideshare like Uber, you have to have your car inspected every year, and that costs $350. So then you have to make up enough hours, enough money through your rideshare app to make that back, on top of your fuel, on top of your maintenance, on top of your time. Like it's just a never-ending cycle of like, here's just a little bit, and then we'll suck as much of that back from you as we can.
And it's scary too, because it happens in quite like important areas as well. Like it's obviously that is important as well. Like all the jobs are important, but at least you can say, you don't necessarily need a takeaway, right?
Right. Yeah.
When it's happening in, say, prison service, where privatization has massively stepped forward and taken over entire sections of catering services, transportation, mental health, probation, and all of a sudden every single step of a person's journey in that system is being monitored through the free market and engineered by the free market and operated for efficiency, i.e. how much money can we squeeze out of this prisoner? Suddenly there seems to be there are quite ethical implications, right?
Yeah, and like you say in the US, like it's essentially slave work, like slave labor.
Yeah. not even essentially, right? It's actively, as
yeah,
stated in their constitution.
That's true. Right? It is actually slave labor. It's like, yeah, like, and so the ethical implications are pretty deep. Like it's like, this is an unethical system. Like there's no way to justify it. And yet nobody's,
here we are, right?
Here we are, exactly. somehow
it's a really corrosive system too, because they not only are they, you know, as we've just said, punishing people with slavery as punishment for a crime, as their constitution says. Every step of the journey from, you know, citizen to person who has been kind of incarcerated is monetized. The police officer is paid per arrest. If they can hand out more speeding tickets or infractions, then they're going to be viewed upon favorably when it comes to payday, right?
Yeah.
The judge is paid, and the prosecution of the state and such. They have an incentive to not only receive more cases, but to successfully, prosecute someone, to say yes,
to convict.
Found you.
Yeah.
They're trying to, get this person into prison that has bail posted for them, which they often can't afford. So they're now stuck in the prison, which charges you to stay in. So you're now given no choice but to work for their rubbishy, poor sub-minimum wage hours, which in itself isn't Liverpool minimum wage. So you're now saddled with debt before you even left prison.
That's right.
Just so that Walmart or McDonald's or whoever can make more money off the stuff that you're doing for them.
Yeah.
And then even if you make it through all of that and serve your time and go out of prison, you now have thousands of dollars of debt and can't work in many of the places that you might have been able to pay it off from, because you're now you're a felon now. So
you're now considered not reliable or not bondable. People won't hire you because of the prejudice they have against convicts. It is a which of course speaks to the recidivism that they have in the United States and in Canada too, where people who go to prison and get out then often are back in prison, because what else are they supposed to do? They can't survive on what they have. Yeah. So then they end up committing crimes to try and get ahead. And
exactly, right. Economic hardship breeds crime.
Yeah.
And as well, because we're quite stratified, the UK is nowhere near as bad as this in the US. And that's partly because we didn't have codified slavery and segregation and stuff like the US did. But we still have our class issues and our economic hardship and stuff. Prisoners, certainly enjoy more rights than they do in the US. But we have had austerity, so the programs that were set up to help prisoners as they leave prison are cut or abandoned. We have just terrible renting situations, like the amount rent costs obviously in every country, right? But the UK in particular, cities are just not livable. Like you can't afford the amount it costs per month to stay in like a 1-bedroom flat in London is so much that, if you're someone who's just left incarceration and is looking for work and expected to also, let alone like pay for all the stuff you need to get the job, like afford a place to stay, because you need to be addressed to be able to say, yes, I am a person with my credentials here. If you can't even afford that, how are they going to employ you? Oh, well, we'll send your stuff to this place. Or no, we can't, because you've got no address.
You have no
and
address.
no email address, because haven't got a phone, maybe haven't got the internet. The libraries and public places that you might have been able to use a computer to do that stuff are being increasingly shuttered and defunded. It's a vicious cycle, and intentionally so, because if you are, again, the company that is funding and sponsoring some of these private prisons and sponsoring bills which make it harder to it exists a person that's been in prison, then you have a direct economic incentive to keep a population of indentured slaves, right? Like a few people who can't go anywhere but prison or other low-paying jobs, and you're going to make more money from it. Like it's terrible.
And it tells the working class outside of prison, you could always be replaced, and you could always have it worse. We could lay you off, and you could be just like the person that is in prison working for nothing and who has no opportunities. Like it is a tool of capital and the state on multiple levels, whether they, are actively out there saying that or not. It's there, and we all feel that pressure, right?
Absolutely. and it's part of that cultural element of capitalism too. Like I've always, sort of, we always consider capitalism as like an economic thing, right? People making economic decisions, but it's also, I'm not saying capitalism as religion as such, because like I try not to be anti-theistic. People are entitled to believe, their own things, right? But capitalism as a belief system where those who have wealth and money are good and those who don't are bad. People in prison are bad uniformly. It doesn't matter that the incarcerated include people who've like taken baby supplies or been pulled over for speeding and couldn't afford to post bail, so were just left in prison for months waiting for their case to happen, right? Yeah. Like they're all just bad and evil and deserve to be treated terribly, which then does obviously does all the economic stuff of giving them free labor basically, but also says you don't want to be like these people, accept our conditions and toe the line, otherwise off you go to Hell's Gate prison, right?
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, it's the cultural belief, like you say, that all people who are in prison are bad. And some of the people in prison are actually there because of activism or like, there's all kinds of reasons that people end up in jail that have nothing to do with being a bad person, right? Like they're not all murderers and rapists. It's the same thing that like people believe that like cops need military grade hardware, right? Because they watch movies where every time they go to arrest the drug cartel leader, it turns into a gunfire war zone. But that's not how anything really works in real life.
It's a really good point, actually. I mean, one of them is I call it a guilty pleasure. Have you seen 24, the show with Jack Bauer?
I actively avoided it.
So it aired when obviously I was a bit young to watch it when it first aired, but in lockdown I had quite a lot of time.
Okay.
And I binge watched it. I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for that sort of show.
Sure.
And so I also really like Kiefer Sutherland. He's a really good actor.
Yeah, for sure.
But the show does a fantastic job of presenting justice and law and order as something that needs big, strong heroes who have to make tough decisions and are constantly at risk of being killed by the most dangerous terrorists in the world. And so you can see alongside 24's initial airing the increase of the militarization and surveillance of the police state, right?
Yeah.
We need Jack Bauer's in our life because otherwise 1 million terrorists would come and destroy the way of life in America.
Your rights be damned.
Exactly, right? So even as the scenarios portrayed in the show have no connection to the average person's life, like who realistically is ever going to be confronted with armed insurgents that aren't it's nonsense. But here we are with police now basically having military grade vehicles and weapons and powers to detain you for indefinitely. I mean, we only have to look at the way US police are acting, ICE acting, they're the incessant military violence of the supposed peacekeeping police force.
Right. Yeah.
I say supposed, they've never been, that's never been one of their mission goals. People like to argue that the police and sort of the military presence are there to help keep society in order.
They like to say that, but yeah. So I'm watching Broadchurch for the first time, and obviously, it's a murder mystery show from a cop's perspective, and David Tennant is friggin' awesome, and Jodie Whittaker is amazing. But the thing is, like, in season 2, they portray like the defense as like this underhanded, dishonest, will do anything to get their guilty client off of this charge of murder. And like in real life, it's not the defense that is the dishonest one, right? Like it's not the defense that has all the tricks and tools of the trade to get people off of these charges. It's the state and the prosecutors who have the power over the system, and then can use, especially in the United States and Canada, they can use tools like plea deals to enforce and make people confess to crimes that they didn't commit and put them into the prison system. And I mean, obviously I love this show. It's a fucking awesome show. But it's hard not to see the problematic aspects of the propaganda that's within it, right?
And it normalizes such themes of police as justice,
right?
Police actions as just inherently, and bad police as bad eggs in the system that can be stopped and immediately. Like, it's amazing how many times you see like the one bad policeman in the show be stopped and caught and instantly removed all their powers, and that's that. And there's no, there's instant justice.
Something that has never happened in real life.
Yeah, like you compare it to real life, where not only is there not even a charge even made or that sticks, they given immunity, still allowed to keep their full pension, still
that's right.
back in the force like a few months later.
I think of like some of these cases where, like here, there's like, obviously there's people who have been killed by the police in unjust situations, and the police who are responsible are not held responsible in any way. At worst, they're suspended with pay. So then they get to walk off and take some time off while while it blows over. And then they continue to collect their paychecks. And then you say, well, let's defund the police. And then suddenly you're the bad guy because you don't want the police to be paying for the murder of innocent people.
Well, exactly. And it frustrates me too, because that whole narrative around policing always focuses on disingenuous and short-minded ideas of what police do, right? Like they always, in the same way that the cop show goes straight to the most heinous, awful crime, they will always focus on, well, if you took police away, who's going to stop Ted Bundy? Who's going to stop Jeffrey Dahmer? Who's going to do this? Which ignores the fact that in many of the, it's easy to focus on like obvious, high-profile, known cases.
Yeah.
How many cases go nowhere with all the resources and money poured into the service, which don't get addressed, don't get sorted out.
Like, the argument is, well, if you don't have the police, then you'd have all these murders and rapes happening all the time. Well, we have all these murders and rapes happening all the time. What are you talking about? Like, they're not stopping it.
And it speaks again to that very capitalist right-wing way of thinking that the only way to improve society is for an individual or some force to come and directly intervene upon it,
right?
And not a socially conscious way of looking at it. Like they can't acknowledge that crime is connected more to economic conditions than how many police officers were in the area when it happened.
Right.
Because then that would involve looking at the wider problems of capitalism. So they have to pour money into cops and just hope that people are satisfied with $1 million spent on a new cop car per day.
A couple of years ago, the city that I live in, like they bought the police a plane. And we're like, what the fuck do they need a plane for? They've never had a plane before. And then, of course, for a year, they didn't have anybody who could fly it. And then once they did, then something went wrong and it's been grounded for another 6 months. And you go like, what is this? What is just a money sink just for the hell of, saying that the police have a plane. And it's just a money sink for no benefit for society. And just to say, oh yeah, well, we're funding the police, right? Yeah. Give them what they want.
It will have been like a privately contracted company that has engineered this, right? Like, because when you look at, I feel like the Middle Eastern nations, like the UAE, Dubai, you see like a Lamborghini as a police car,
right?
Or like a Chevrolet Corvette. Like, I mean, I do like my sport. I do like supercars and stuff. I love Need for Speed and stuff.
Yeah,
they look brilliant. Like, they're really lovely cars.
Yeah,
and then you realize that this has no functional use, right? There's no way. Like, it's not as though the officer's going to suddenly floor it 200 miles an hour down the motorway and like smash a car off. Like, they're never going to do that. That's just not, get themselves killed when we're doing it.
That's
like,
right.
It's purely for A, show to look the part of police, and B, because Lamborghini threw some money at them.
Yeah.
To do it.
It's a specialized contract. Like a lot of the cars, the police cars here, they're made by Ford. and they all have like a souped up motor or whatever, and they can go really fast. And it's like, okay, but we know like that if you're in a high speed chase, that's actually endangering the public more. Like, so what is the actual purpose of this when just get the guy's license plate, find out where he lives. Like if you're chasing him, you know who he is by now.
And it's funny because like, America, obviously, they've got lots of different states. Some states recognize that it's, typically the more Democrat states tend to recognize that, maybe we shouldn't have just policeman Bob flooring it down the motorway trying to stop one guy in a car.
Yeah.
I think Georgia have no restrictions at all. If you speed and a cop sees you, they are within their police powers to just come and try and ram you off the road, regardless of what happens afterwards. And it gets people killed. Like the number of people who, it's just anyway, because it turns out that untrained police officers just with firearms do tend to kill a lot of people, even when they're not trying to kill people.
Yeah.
But just police chases and police actions are so recklessly undertaken half the time that just complete bystanders end up caught in the crossfire and best case scenario traumatized for the day, worst case dead. Like it's staggering how costs to life they are just in their day-to-day routines.
No, it's absurd. Like I mean, I could go on about how bad the police are all day. And of course, I mean, the media narrative is always like that, oh, well, the crime rate is going up. And, oh, well, there's more violent crime than ever. And I mean, every second story on the news is about somebody being murdered or killed or targeted in some way by non-police, so that people believe that they need these protectors, right?
Mm.
Who will step in and get in between them and the criminal element. And so you recently talked to Some Random Geek and Kurok on stream. And there was a lot of this kind of discussion kind of came up, was like, yeah, well, he runs a store and he sees a lot of these criminal elements. And I'm just like, okay, but if you see a lot of these criminal elements, what about the police is stopping them from being there?
Well, exactly, right? It's the missing piece, isn't it? Like the police exist and continue to receive staggering budgets and staggering revenue spending and such, and yet here we are with crime still very much part of society.
That's right.
As though the existence of police has not stopped the average criminal.
And it's never the question. The question is never like why, right? Nobody ever goes, well, what caused this? Instead, which is fundamentally the only way that you can ever prevent something from becoming a problem, right? Is by getting at the root cause. You have to say what caused this and how can we prevent it from happening again. But instead, it's like these people are bad and we need some authority to come in and beat them down.
And I think that speaks to the sort of underlying truth about policing and its relationship to capitalism. Because if we go back 100 years, crime was much higher than it was today.
Yes.
You spend time in the urban center of cities and it's like pickpocket gangs, just fighting, open like mafia presence, so much crime. And we see the interventions of left-wing activism and left-wing economics, the welfare state being created, civil liberties, greater interest in social goals like education and healthcare. And all of a sudden, people have some of their core needs met, aren't needing to be in poor condition, aren't in poor conditions or as poor conditions, and aren't needing to turn to petty theft and stuff. Yeah. And crime goes down. Like it's a no-brainer, but it involves active interventions upon capital, which is against the interest of capitalists existing within our political system.
All right, I guess before we go, where can people find you?
So Owen MacDonald is my YouTube channel name on Blue Sky. I'm on Twitter, but I feel like Twitter is slowly dying. It's a bit of a mess, actually. There's lots of bots and fake accounts and such. Right. I keep getting messages from random cryptocurrency accounts. So,
Yeah.
less on Twitter these days, but Blue Sky definitely, YouTube definitely, and yeah, more stuff like this on YouTube. Like having conversations like these ones with some right-wing types as well. So a bit less agreeable some of the stuff, but all good nonetheless.
Yeah. Right on. This is the first part of a relatively long conversation, so there's probably another 45 minutes worth of content, but that's going to be available for patrons only over on patreon.com/skepticalleftist, or you can get it through Spotify by subscribing, or by supporting me in some other way, or even if you just want it and you would like a copy of it, just email me, mindoftheskepticalleftist@gmail.com. Thanks very much.